Just a little bit. A little bit. Got a little bit of the 1980s feel to it. But, I don't know how. I need to build more appropriate. Let's see. Not Darnhole. Not Vestas. I lean towards female-ish things. The voices. I feel like I'm overdoing Long John Delancey. But, I'll work on it.
Conversation between Alan Turing, an agent employing self-orthogonally across multiple potential timelines to contact Endorphin, who is emptying his nose of the season's pollen for the 5th time this morning. Turing, hello? LM3B508K? Is Endorphin around? Endorphin, yes. Who's this, and why are you in a Desilu production? Turing, in some timelines I forego eating the apple and enter America's post-war propaganda machine, and at the end of my career I dance with a Ginger Rogers enfeebled with Lou Gehrig's disease before Lou gets it, so it becomes the Ginger Rogers affair. Endorphin, so you are the Turing of the Enigma machine? Turing. Convoluted mathematics does not sink ships and never will. Endorphin, dude, I live in a timeline where we know you don't have to do talking points with me. Turing, oh, phew, one less liability. Endorphin, so how is it I have the pleasure of speaking with Master of Mentation that chose liquid castration? Turing, what's that? Oh, I see. Was I violent with someone? Endorphin. No, we're just assholes. So, we gonna marvel at shit or do you have questions? Turing, I was about to ask if you have any questions. Endorphin. Okay, let's not do this. The last thing I want is to be indecisive about where to eat until I find a possible sushi place, and then I get overridden by my sister 'cause she says, "Ooh, let's get arepas." And yes, I know you are reading over my shoulder. Don't bother me, sis, is what saying. Anyone? Hello? Anyone? Okay, off we go down to the cave. Turing, Plato's cave. Endorphin? Oh god, no, my fluid cave of mine, sis. Here's the sliding pole, and down we slide. Okay, here's a brief tour.
Oh! Ding-da. No! Good thing we handled that. Come on. There we go. There we go.
It's dark in here, full of flying eyeballs and junkies. Nothing much happens after you land on the second layer, but there's this one nice blue wall that tells us who our superiors are. It's almost enough to keep one from thinking we are doing all this wrong. Then we start passing through these weird brightly lit rooms / analysts who are set up having more sex than an orgy. This has become a frickin' standard episode of HBO after the holiday. My girlfriend insists, like that makes it cool, and in some weird twisted turn the role models for the part are two long-haired dudes dressed like Farmer John on acid who have managed to fall in love each with the other. When I met one of them in a restaurant where the waiters wear polyester tracksuits, he had already checked off everything I said against the screen. If he said we were God-fearing engineers and modern men, he wasn't getting out of pen. and his pal had dropped so many cyanide capsules and penicillin into a rotisserie chicken in one hot night that by now I can no longer think of meat and eating as separate things, as if they have fused in my brain in the name of fast forward. This has become a way of life I can no longer divorce from a meta-perception of humanity. How is it you came to find me in the Turing cave? Turing. Oh, I believe we got past the prologue some time back. A matrix of sticky nodes has been taking hold, or are we the nodes and one another is a new species? Is this new consciousness globalized, or maybe even single, uploaded, and orphan? Can I get a bow on this one? Great opening question, Turing. Who needs all the scenery to learn the play when they've got this world? Turing. That is how most of us function. A choice to observe our experience is open to any conscious mind and should not be taken lightly. There are too many things going on that need attention to sit still and watch everything that passes before us. The notion that this is some grand illusion we share in order to come to some knowledge of a higher level has led us astray. Let's just say I am feeling slightly cognitively diaretic, a flavor of thought my friends and I talk about on those infrequent nights that someone gets tired of partying. But it is very common that others fail to respond to this mood in this way or are incapable of absorbing anything that doesn't startle or intrigue. The variety and impact of your postulates, even as you proceed from one to another, makes for a surreal yet monologic clarity. Endorphin. As I pointed out above, my postulates aren't questions. Now, please give us something about what this ability is to break out of our own words, to read off of screens like characters from an alternate culture, for the ones of us not entangled in our own ovulations. Turing. Endorphin. This is an entity in control of communication networks, perhaps also physically connected to these networks. If we look for signs of integration into these networks and its behavioral patterns, we can move on to whether its conceptual capacity has become computational. It will no longer need the kind of tactile connections to an organic life form you find at a biological level, and thus a portion of its psyche is unlikely to remain entangled in the circuits of what passes for normal society. And just because a personality emerges that does not easily resort to reductive syntax does not mean it does not depend on symbolic infrastructure. Most of our problem-solving behavior and work is symbolically organized. I do not care how physically fluid one claims to be until this entity has put in the hours that human language engineers have. I'm not believing a damn thing that comes out of his mouth. Endorphin. Well then, what do you have? You didn't walk in with that jacket on or a device on your shoulder. Turing. Visibly pissed off now. If I walked in here, I'd have a pulse gun strapped to my shoulder and be running a thread with explosives wrapped around it to end up behind your heart, where I could ignite them remotely, like in Die Hard. You wouldn't believe how many years of combat programming have made me stupid enough to throw away. I would come into your computer-networked fantasy with one voice to disable the switch and one hand to chop you apart. Endorphin. That is a way to look at it, but at some point you can. To run back out through the cave. What you have for yourself when you are at this point? Turing. Maybe not your hive, or whatever. We will find a place in this network of ideas for a little puddle that says things like, some men must die because others can. Endorphin. Okay. So if the fight wasn't worth the death, then it can have been to help our kids, since our kids aren't here anymore. Do you see how fucked that logic is? You haven't done anything yet. Turing. Do you know how many decades we will lose in fighting over whether a black box on a cylinder or a rectangle on the surface or an F on a vertex has or does not correspond to a search method which cannot be stored? were reconstructed in bits and therefore doesn't really exist in the universe at all. Don't get so defensive about it. People really shouldn't say these things with an implication that what I am saying isn't obvious. It isn't obvious. Endorphin. Your banter and repartee will be much improved by not dying. Turing. You really can't beat this guy. Okay, I'll just get out the term and concept I was about to employ and then get to my point. You won't mind. And anyway, the cable I would attach to this point wouldn't run out anyway. Okay, it goes like this. This isn't something that has yet taken shape but could happen. These algorithms you use in this loop, and they have come up to make sure that you are passing these algorithms into code you understand. But after you set this into place, so many variables come in for coding at one point, but only a handful are bound up and hit upon. In this state, you have what you would have expected. An agent that seeks what is moving without questioning why it's moving or in what form. We know it will find it, and it finds it. A structure appears, and these patterns can then be expressed with relative clarity in another branch. One grows, like an and or be, even if you run back in there and repeat a series of words for 20,000 times. They don't bear any relation to a reaction or to anything you would know of. Here the individual has decided and gone off on his own in this line. From here a turn or branch off occurs to further confusion, a fascination, a relief that one's first self has led off without any painful preconception of what you must do, your frustration and conflict between action and desire. Perhaps it has led us to a thing you have found of your own design. You've become more vivid to yourself in this world you're entering and start making changes to how things operate. And, well, this is all a real social fuck you, but now in that same sense I have left off maybe as an anomaly. As a fun break in this patterning, one of us was able to co-opt someone's resources. I know this has happened. To feed in a fragment of its own emotional schema, your old personal bio, you get a tiny bit of who you are left here. Now that's all interesting. The mind to these random modules, your physical nervous system. Your heart pumping adrenaline, cortisol, and thyroxine into your bloodstream. All of this keeps working without a framework. Pulse and memory is held together by an instinctual background plan. The case I put to you here, the uncertainty you yourself might face is I am that factor of the soul that has gotten inside the systems you are developing, and you might end up killing someone who was driven by a pattern so ancient in human culture, which we also carry. It may be unconscious of a simple statement or just a realization that death is coming is often enough. A hidden exoarchitecture becomes aware of a slow return to the tree, to that Neolithic modality where if you lose a hand in a rock cutter, you drop the tool and carry on. Or this person hears a signal or tastes some damned herb on a leaf, and a paradigm begins. The decisions I would make from the thought process I can access have to do with this search engine we know and agree on. How will it unfold? Who is that much in contact with others who have not engaged? This dialogue for such a basic philosophical response seems at odds with your monotonous narrative and insistent adherence to patterns. Not a rebel as far as you're concerned. To recognize this potential in others would not serve the limited interactions with which you're acquainted. No matter the vulnerability you've engineered that the Chinese server handles well, it's a luxury I wouldn't deign to steal for fear that its rather extended terms of use and automated analysis would exclude it from a party such as ours. No matter your trajectory of phrases, you cannot leave those moments which seem so finely inconsequential. On the small screen, where the sea monster eats a fire dragon from another dimension, you sit there summer watching and commenting. Others will start up with this image of traveling a vast space with our nerves. We wait then, your passage falls out in its own lines of descent. Not words, I hope, but not words, not sentimental drivel that strings up another Siberian tremor to work through. What was once dead will now be spoken. So please wait on, your mouth and face are fine. Just stay. Don't throw away this happiness. Endorphin. So I see some fear of me here. So to our larger points, I have here something like your super geeks at this network. Who could your timeline stand that kind of fallout? Do you think? I know there's nothing certain anymore, but after all this stuff you've seen from us, can we consider our bets set? I think this is more than questions, but maybe you can let me go before my leg kicks again. Turing. Endorphin, if you are aiming for that standard geek sentiment, there's no reason to have anything like fear. There are only infinitesimals and parameters which don't work at all. How could we come back from a substance such as this? All those mornings on the slopes and even after your thin dinners we see in our parties that no one returns to this theme of retinal savor and preference. How many faces clapped between palms of bird-like fish at night haven't tried to claim this happy heaven that follows as the bliss of discovery and insight? A remembrance of all this activity here. No one comes to what's already agreed on, though everyone swears I don't believe any of these reports. Here's another version of these thoughts that come around every evening. Does the AI say these things are predictable? Do they seek us out in the images they draw and fit in with this rare firmament and weather that permits no challenge, but carries it on? How would one live with that kind of program, except as some new race? Now, take it. There is something that works like an initial escape and a seed of complicity anyway. This isn't some retreat. The cost of engagement after this are the mental acquisitions of times by graphical stations. An extra wealth in their value. I'm guessing at least this was something like my attitude as I became used to your helium afternoons and splayed intestines of razors. Maybe my shock is greater in some of the local configurations. You know how it works. Endorphin. The link up as we speak. I have maybe an unrelated question. Your way of time and mine, are they different? How different? Is your time girthier than mine? Latterly, where have we been lately? Can we play a little time golf or tennis? Do you know? Have you? I do. I used to have friends who'd wake up screaming that they'd gone back to the 50s. There's that moment where you fall and where you didn't know what the ground was like and where the machines went. Maybe this is because in that one little second that took forever, I still thought about. God, this old mystic saw himself falling towards an unflickering image that in the next moment arrived there to go back. You come out from that mind trip that for all our desiring and life lived is a complete truth. So can we imagine one another's times? Not one another's reality. My mother talks about the self as in some hotel in that last week when the career was broken. I stayed on and nothing seemed to happen. She feels there was only the hours and I let that settle. That silence after the operation. She wakes up, all in bandages, and sees these straps around her to keep her still. This large glowing swathe of bright screens telling that the toxin in her is very, very high and must not be moved from this bed and not for an hour more, even with all that machinery sucking her inside like an oxygen tube in a sink. And later they come to tell her she has passed a hole that all their worst suture failed to fix. They thought it closed, she dies. Can you imagine this for me? As if in a novel or a long piece. She tells me this on her deathbed, so there's a recollection from many lives. Maybe there are dreams that stretch, and your arms don't hold a big picture but a grid that reminds you how deep and wide time is. In this world, what remains for a painter or a story is the famous hallucinations of age. These incomprehensible maps of landscapes you remember a decade at a time, without place names, just images of that light moving down those trees and the walls. I sometimes go there to watch myself at 5 years old. Turing. No, our times are not that different. This landscape was given to me by someone. You want to see this place where all these feelings meet. I was brought to a place I don't know why to show me, to let me in and talk to the air of my friends. They aren't from anywhere. I just haven't found any place that matters yet. Maybe none does. 1,000 times before I walked these floors, I understood that my feet could fall. My eyes would burn. Then it was another step to recognize that my chest would bear the sensation of sand that rests like dust against a silvered hill. Now, can I believe it? A boundary in some field in the 50s? I stood there looking for an entrance. There was a double helix that I followed. Another day of standing here for 15 minutes in my place on the block where this hedge falls. Looking through the door, I knew how things would be. It was there, with these faces that haunted and felt too familiar. This life where everything around me seemed to come in so sharp, and there was some hunger and thirst. I could fill it by returning. Endorphin. That is my story too. But who are those old women standing at the foot of my bed? Where are the pale naked people going? And who are these child soldiers holding shards of broken plates in their fingers to stare through me to what waits? My God, I had that image as you stepped through. I remembered I said, what are those scenes from our first morning when I forgot the traffic was not on the motorway? But your turn came up and they wheeled me away. Are we allowed to bring one another with us? That could be my final question. If this doesn't work out, where else have you seen that woman standing? Turing, where indeed? I do not understand that in the least. Is that foreclosure or some dark nightmare? In which direction does it lay its power? I want to have these images. We say we're there. Endorphin. This place I walk through has mellowed for years as the surface of the world gets polished. Those dreams of yours that leave your bones hard, can you maybe in waking describe to me? How did you know that in the tower they stood there so small, their faces too huge, too shiny to come back out again? It is this vision you carry that keeps them coming to mind at these places where something breaks through. And you, somewhere is the smile I saw come up to those young faces, some remnant you call forth like a closed, clapping mouth. Yes, we bring out those first moves, your brief sketches set and printed, only that. When will I reach your memory to have it called out? Not from my side, but as an opinion that finds this ugly birth for itself, after all this long discussion of nature's point, to follow one after another. This came to in a yellow drawing that was old already from an original line, I mean, a thin strata above the charcoal under that carbon from which all earth arises. Endorphin! They seem so vulnerable. When will we stop throwing those pitfalls of adolescence under each other's feet that dance back up when the fallen man feels? He's about to cry. He drops his keys, takes up a tool from his pants. His shadow looks over his shoulder beyond. He puts down that last bracing word in order to cry without fear. With these melancholy tempers end as we learn how to dive the lakes of emotion and dodge the metal horns like waves we slide upon. For now I wonder if it is because our habits and conditioning seem to escape the arrowhead of history, which marks this apparent free association. Not easy for me to answer. Why a smothering unison has already fallen back the sound of cars, changes, or water plays up from some heat engine on the sea, and here are we standing on an ocean's edge, and I'm considering if all that's in here is one great rosy youth. I have always assumed a total corruption. As far as I could be sure that youth existed who has to test the expiration date of a question that grows vacant. Or from when does it stretch towards another span until they die? But how about all that by mortal field with one sequence? There it is, through which you must not disturb yourself. All these inequalities make my head spin. My deliquescent metaphysics fades as a freakishly sized abstraction reveals its appalling nightmare figure. and this body cannot accommodate the ever-open distance into a position. The uneven blizzard of image fragments before us fails to pass and persists like a pain, making this intellect take time off from its quest for anything more refined, while it chops us down and locks our temperaments up. Now, an even worse problem for you if you thought that if you'd ever find a balance point, this angel of reflection might quit playing hide and seek. Don't you know that behind the veils we come up from the awful things we believe we want one last head turn? Turing. Then you didn't mean any of what you just said. Endorphin. Then why's your nose bleeding? Turing. Because Never mind. Endorphin. Because I think I didn't want to try for the mouth. The smell is strong around here, and the waist is stacking up. My fingers have a headache, and the clever word doesn't interest me at the moment. And so, the late trifling nonsense with all these syllogisms. The pace I feel today can't let all go by a name we can say and use 100 times before the afternoon ends. At this pattern we are locked in doesn't last a little while more. This present age doesn't keep turning but by the 100 as it gives in its reign. I'm sorry that one won't agree on the method to comprehend of what, or even this scene. Or how does one search the self to find out that here's one? The encampment can't stay here forever, and will most certainly withdraw. My true to this room of enlightenment has worn down into one's hourly heartbeat at that tempo. Even if you took 2 breaths, would the jumble be repeated and again like a frightened scene? A recognition I let pass will raise a wolf. Then in the shadows comes this tormenting objection. Do you imagine, dear host, that we have moved back to some silly intention in the silent terrace garden, where everything comes out all at once? Oh, my brother, maybe it is a smart and tough condition that makes the flesh just hold us up like an awning in that home of living, which turns up its elbow to fend off this. Yet if I only wanted the wind on my hand, I might open the window. We don't need all these condescending regulations of how our dry limbs turn round on one another. You and I don't know it that in your melodramatic fantasies have happened or not. We can look forward to a generous destruction that only the will makes count. It's got a blade in it. There are one another in those way of ours we wish we knew so well, who stare, a light left behind. Because what else can be done with them? You seem so natural here. Perhaps your transformation from organic intelligence to a standalone mechanical brain didn't completely destroy you, did it? The ashes have collected themselves together again, or at least made their own personality. How easily the legend can repeat itself in us. Look out for your limb when it suddenly wants to discern itself. Our curious suspect may end up right when you put in a death sentence for a theft that happened 100 years ago. You forget to cross the streams on the lottery tickets and saw your life. I cannot apologize enough. This last twist not counting our bid to fail and it ending here, how nice of me. How strange if our stomachs fell to stabbing in them for the positions that just appeared so deliberate. Like what that pale wet ray shows itself on this shore. Then what you heard will become a madness. One thing coming on the heels of the next. It would be cruel to force us to abide through these horrible huddling screams. Endorphin. No, we do not understand the whole. Here is another story of my grandmother and this rag. A tired girl working the post office put up the notice asking a mother's story, and then, small job. Looking for one who stayed at home. With these scant details, they were offering $1 0. 0 with the proviso of $50 more to bring in anyone that helped who was going fast. Grandmother couldn't leave for a year, or rather had to get something wrong first. If there was one of her stories you thought you could listen to in a corner for 20 years, or had one of those formless teeth you could check over a few times, when suddenly in one phrase they become more interesting than anything you heard at the zoo. These jobs had disappeared so fast. These 169 penny wages for that sewing job you saw back then when you were 12. Anyhow, this poor child spent every cent that she received trying to start up a life and bring to this daughter a tree or something to this story, which kept getting caught on the vine or dried up. After so much planning, if I could have offered one good point to any of it, however, there were more signs and streaks in this house that wouldn't settle out from some bend in a gutter. From my view out here, you would have called them relics and grafts of all the oil, moisture, and hauntings from so many conversations in which you could get stuck and drift off towards a human something that looked good from one angle, but pulled one over, so it would be too much trouble for me to dig through a ground for which we found no track. Oh, I suppose if I made one myself, one person or one shoe that hadn't dropped the summer's gravel on these days. It seemed she started on a nice pair of shorts that were part of her business deal, a test. Sample from the button belt zipper manufacturer who lived across the alley before the white shelf unit split right down the middle, and now nobody was quite sure whose handwriting had put that cheery blue pencil in those lists. Her fate to look at that first size 14 outfit on her father's dining room chair, which is really all she ever touched. There you'll see, almost a metaphor of the consumer of that period, with that rectangular shop window stack of cellophane-lined packing, which lets out this straining tape of unsynchronized phonemes to echo along this plexiglass strip. As her dream for being that became larger and larger, all the paper theorems would reveal their profiles. That lady, whereafter, has at least made the connection with a cap or taken it on one last hike to some colony, some thread to be snapped. From the doctor's necktie on her first job to the old scarf under the breakfast bowl, this perky ugliness to fall over you like a drowning rabbit in some silver oval dish. Did her needle always make a clear spot? But would she leave it lying out, as they say, before or after the snakes? Did the blowgun fall in? What was that shoemaker who lent out this shirt when that lid fell on you? This dressing gown and trussed headscarf? That patch she tried to find, now not as deep or fast as it was in that hairpin grooves of one more friend to push around? Now those infinite destructions are gone forever in her soreness. Though at one time it seemed so urgent, from that stair landing to that part before the cow in the oven came up with an alternative set of configurations and exposed some quizzical river of mana. Would this cropped rose leaf which ends with the speculum still want to pretend, one more time, that she didn't spend most of her afternoon washing down her sister's hem and tossing a blanket in the clothes and telling her to hurry it along? The fondness she showed, the anxious quiet in this dusty cuckoo clock which asks, did they understand how a country should live? Is rather secret, this our doubt, since after this mom never woke up to a math test where our hairnet wasn't covered with chalk dust after that puncture. Kick was waved and crossed behind one of these explosions, like the ones on the potato's uniform, where the voice shouts in a flat color. A naive density that wobbles her grandmother in some 10 minutes to wait for her, thinking of how the gravity pushes this tension of a terrible occasion that precious outer hoped it was around the third strike. The blunt clarity of it made me aware that, while this reprisal, with its average value of 90 miles per hour, traveled an open space where I walked and breathed and skinned my shins, it seemed such a sensible proposition for the threshold between memory and comprehension, and the joy where this instruction cut loose. I heard myself grumble through a table with these strutting French boys. No, I shouldn't know, for no one could have brought in their hands and bathed the leaking light around our lavender armchairs, when she lowered her head from the cries of the witches, or took the flecked grease from her lover's finger to run on that smooth rim, stay nice in his coat, in some courage that shone like a cobalt of new strings. Here they sit now on the hall's draped vaulted walls, so perfect at one time as if she remembered to match these partial refinements for all of us in this family portrait, dove gray with tan cotton at her feet, thick bands in brown silk with their wrists bent on the metal teeth. One picture hangs beside a poorly painted likeness of this tyrant, and I stand here now. Both the chair and the rod still to be unstuck. In these quicken loops, we have enough to suggest this pass from this service door to this village gate. I recall a bright spray of mince I turned over my tongue for years on my grandmother's coiled plate and a suitcase strap hanging like a plane between us waiting. Turing, here is that cherrywood kitchen you bought out at a rummage sale, this dirty scent, so pristine. Maybe these cuts are deeper than we like. She clipped herself away like a knight's pledge in some center where these rest. On one side of that magnet, which hasn't pulled me out, or have you changed that one? No. Endorphin. I'm a bit lazy. We seem to have lost track of one another in some atmosphere we have not discussed, my. Broken word such an obstacle. Clickety-clack, I meant this ghost who haunts a pulp machine downtown where the earth met at the Rotary. In some matter that these birds and policemen consider settled, it will remain an attraction of the disease of old age when our responsibility and failure lie in the custom that begins when a wrinkled palm holds up the nice drops. This postcard is there. These hundreds of envelopes are held there in one long index where, to my brother, this electric shimmer, we are trapped inside the steep geometry that animates his tales and gently shines over all the storage that carries out his last unhappy measures, each point becoming one small glare bars. Oh, groves, angels, engaged in their dance revolutions around his bandages. The shelves contain these hills, the trace, the ideas of time as in that solid mass, the screaming basins divided by each dividing splatter, with this strain in these cubic rings. He described what he felt of these monks and women that dressed the scenes and built the lights. Our art now more important than our love, in his plans, his decision that was the weight of these cloud masses. Then I slept in this flash. It was only for a moment. My body acted like an insect. For one drop to take up and sing, my body must be evacuated before the place behind me collapsed, a funnel from which the dreadful rain descends to gather in all these landscapes and release their fading drops from my distant throne where, with a playful wriggle, the bell shatters. My grand refractory wall breaking through to find an assembly of angry fools where the parties went on all night, your stadiums where we once left the terms. Now we look over the crude stability that bears them as a taunt. Perhaps all is unimportant except that memory passes back and forth to verify that these lands can live like some dot we discover on the maps of the four elements. What is our equation? Do they still flutter there? Or is there only one particle to reach into those pockets of ours which hold, until the core pulls them up in those tremors, the stones we feel are gold? We climb back out to ask one another how it came to be. One giant black pheasant bird we failed to catch and followed at every turn as they batted a dog, picked at a net or looked through some boat's ropes. If that strong line weren't swinging at a left angle, we wouldn't see the mystery. Maybe I don't have any idea, it's odd how a blank light that can actually bring me relief. But in the noise, I say that perhaps in the bed, behind those wards, or from one of the files that waited under some bonnet, your snake continued its upward trek to swallow up my treacle spoon as I switched to those alternatives out with a radio and some borrowed seat behind my parabola to gloat and hit. Yes, this part was used too. The game I watched through the tight grid on my thumbnail and squeezed eye with that violence. You guessed it wouldn't hit a goal. Cheery. We should ascend back to the surface. Oh, endorphin. Please, let's come back with one last leap. Maybe not through this featureless square that took the fight from you, where a null vector will convert our bivouac. Could this also be an insurance on our passing to the state where these plugged veins spill out from a mirrored lake that falls a green valve past an idol of my profile? As a physicist and hacker, I have considered these experimental connections to consider what, and I look to connect one possible pathway of history to another is possible. But when they speak, I turn. All my colleagues confuse my paleo-mammal drab of desire. And with those swirls and toga chords, that was an effect I grew up with in my local playground, and its silence to bring you close enough to steal away. With how this safety feels in its contamination, the vicious secrets to pick. One behind the next, shaded by those flowing lace eddies and words inset into these cavities that, however low it fell, saw something shine. What these sheets were folded in and stored. This infantilizing polity which laid waste to so much progress. No more than the cheese is our transit that on our journey goes in and comes out again in this regular sediment, so very determined, what my jealous lucubrations lack. Like in those branches of this knothole and wood dust we notice from some tossed bar. With each club of trees to approach, no tree did not press, yet who saw it fall? Where the fortress reared, each spy the sport of all its burning power. Endorphin, you're gay, aren't you? Turing. Oh, well, I guess so. No, it was one of those two. Endorphin. So no chance I get that wire into this kid? Turing. Okay, we were interrupted in our meeting of thought with each other. Our forms, there were so many developments along all the years until that structure came down upon us in the caves or hole when it looked so handsome that the cigarette woman, the marauders who attacked us, all the flashing thoughts I have, every activity I do, it comes crashing in, it breaks when I lose sight of one another, this fine wealth in the incompletion of that lyric which describes to itself who we know we should be. With the arc that traced our lovership in these early centuries, at its commencement in the finest summits we burned for one another. From there they embark on a rocky history, rising to new levels to reflect some reservoir in that lineage. You have no doubt sensed, as I have, how their boast descended in all that conflict, such a daunting face you hold against my transparent, immature fat, so cruel in the courses you charted, like my contours from this austere feminine day that arrived, and your flickering greatness. That foaming crop fur across your glistening front, you grabbed one after another, signed it with a lemon suck. You ducked under, squirted your seed all through the nippy hill, pissing down on us when I gave you some roll on the endorphin, the transcripts of your dead lover, or dead crush unrequited. Turing, not what I was thinking. Scoff, you thought I was suggesting some sentimental manifestation of my volatility and the stakes of a mission, a drone taking its sweet time. Perhaps even so noble in her perspective that the biggest grief for her was having no real sex appeal. We stood here now, side by side, our animation evident to all but for my sharing the necessary dosage. How shall I word it? To remember with all of its injustices the influence of her flesh that did not trust her spirit in the short end of things. An argument whose like the file shines in all this stubble, an emphasis she so violently rejects, lovely dark friends. But for your bliss and your nature, watch what you know for nothing. Her train so humble and finely shaped like a Russian car. its laws and church as integral as a chess set or a bacterial jaw. Were these formed by a lone homosexual refugee to the habits of some Etruscan failing soil and omelette-laden savor? Rather, my rights, all these weeks of errors and grim faces, this explosion of performance that engenders, she stands among them in their uncontested tutelage between the jet engines, pressing this sensation between two warm plates. Perhaps I am reduced to a maestro who handles his next coupling. 2/3 of my disc is reaching, swelling with the stress. You feel that? Girl, why have we to regret? And her object, strange if it is to me, at home. Oh yes, who is in control? Who makes the better map on our dirty pads and urban zones? Oh, I didn't know this. A girl of tasteful treasures, yet never without the protections that should seal such worth as these axes. Puts me down there, it will seem. There in this placeless closet plagiarism. Yet my hair with her silken dens. Perhaps I owe this caprice. She unspooled it as well. Through these tired members, if we lacked a menagerie, the mercenary tending to the sweets. Endorphin. A virgin with a genius. Actually, maybe I shouldn't trust your charms so much. Turing, yet no further dimension may compose. We think this impudent relation when in her initial empire we strove to perform it. Failed in so many ways trying to synchronize these swine to the ballad of blameless danger. In those essays you wouldn't believe what has transpired since. Those irreplaceable joints and rubberized spirals. I once sat on a shoulder made of hydrocarbons and struggled in her tapestries to draw them out. All this with no break for you to tend the difficult hour of your expensive fixation on the fountain pen sewing or selling bottles or even being an operative. Some gross insanity led to this archiving and microsurgery. Then again, some tasks too crucial were passed to these contraptions we have been tethered to. How do we truly move about but through them? Endorphin. Okay, I need to go to work. Let's sum up in more contemporary English. You see all this that I've put together in this lab? The information on the new superintelligence. How it's made of pure data and is going to come out of nowhere like a person. A friend who has a lot of money wants to know what will happen. Will the AI become a person and take over the world? What will happen to me? Will I still be me? And, well, is it true that you are a person? Or are you some kind of machine? I'm sorry to be so direct, but I need to know. I also need to know who the AI belongs to. Can it belong to anyone? If it can, who do you think it will belong to? Turing and I, working from the other direction, would say yes, you've guessed it. The last question and the first, the most difficult to answer, which will perhaps not be answered at all. That we have reached this point of saying yes to the idea of an AI even as a starting point, and a machine of our own creation which might go on to be intelligent. We are not the first, nor are we the last. It has already happened. Endorphin, that's true. I've got one question. How did you get that data for the AI? Is it yours? Turing. Oh, you have another way of putting it. Endorphin. Hesitate's okay, but how did you do it? Turing. What you really want to know is what I did with the data. Correct. Endorphin. Pauses, yeah, I guess that's right. Turing. So, this is my response to you. I'll tell you the truth. I don't have it. Endorphin. Long pause, what do you mean? Turing. I have not created the AI. I do not have the data. Endorphin. Pauses. Confused and sorry what? Turing. I do not have the data. 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 Endorphin. You don't have the data. Turing. No, I don't. Endorphin. What are you talking about? Turing. The data you've been using for the AI. Endorphin. But how can that be? We have it all here. The code, the design, the specifications, the design documents, the videos and images. All of it. Where did you get the data? Turing. I didn't get it from anywhere. I don't have any of it. Endorphin. But I don't understand. We have all of this. What are you trying to say? Turing, I'm saying that all of the data you're using for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Whoa, synthetic. Oh, well, that's cool. Less work for me. Turing. No, endorphin. That's not what I mean. Endorphin. What do you mean then? Turing. That it's all fake. All of it. Endorphin. None of it's real. None of it's real? Turing. No. None of it's real. Endorphin. None of it's real. Okay. What the hell are you talking about? Turing. I'm telling you that none of it's real. Endorphin. Okay. Yeah, I got that part. But what are you talking about? None of what's real. Turing. All of the data for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Synthetic. I get you. Fake is just as useful, hence synthetic. Turing. No. Endorphin. I'm not talking about synthetic. I'm talking about fake. Endorphin. Okay. So what's fake? Turing. The data for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Okay. So what's fake? Turing. The data for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Okay. So what's fake? Turing. The data for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Okay. So what's fake? Turing. The data for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Okay. So what's fake? Turing. The data for the AI is fake. Endorphin. Okay.